Imagine this, a vast sky stretching above you, quiet and endless, like a canvas brushed with silver light. In that stillness, something new drifts into our view. It is not loud. It does not blaze like a meteor breaking the air. Instead, it arrives silently, gliding with the patience of ages, carrying secrets from a distance so far that numbers lose meaning. Hey guys, tonight we are going to follow that visitor, an interstellar messenger known as 3I, divided by Atlas, whose journey across the cosmos has already stirred both wonder and unease. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you don't mind, share your location and local time in the comments. I always love to imagine our global circle of listeners, each of us resting beneath the same stars. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. When astronomers first noticed 3I divided by Atlas, it was just a faint smear of light in their instruments, almost invisible against the clutter of stars. They catalogued it as they do with countless objects, icy bodies, comets, asteroids, fragments of creation drifting endlessly. But this one was different. Its orbit did not fit the neat pathways shaped by our Sunday. It came from outside. That word alone carries weight. Outside the known. Outside the family of planets, moons, and dust that we call home. You can picture it. An ancient traveler, born in the frozen dark between stars, wandering for millions of years without a destination, until, by chance or by design, it entered our system. It moved quietly, yet with a trajectory that refused to obey the familiar equations. Unlike the comforting loops of Jupiter or Saturn, this comet's path cut across, as though it had stepped into the solar stage uninvited. And here is where the mind begins to drift. If the solar system is a house, with the planets as familiar rooms we know, then 3I divided by Atlas is the stranger at the door. It did not knock, and yet it stands there, waiting, silent, watching. The silence of 3I divided by Atlas is not the absence of sound, it is a kind of presence. In space, where no air can carry a voice, silence becomes the only voice there is. Scientists measured its spectrum, the way it reflected sunlight. They noticed faint shades of green and blue, colors that give the impression of breath, of life. Was it just chemistry, frozen gases releasing in solar heat? Or was there something more, something intentional about the way it glowed? It is easy to dismiss such thoughts as romantic. Science, after all, demands caution. But even the most disciplined researcher, staring at the data, must have felt it, the strange sense of being watched back. Perhaps you have felt this too on a quiet night, gazing at stars. That feeling that the sky is not empty, but alive with attention. NASA's official reports were steady, clinical, careful, but behind the steady words, there was an undercurrent of hesitation. The visitor had arrived, and no one was sure what it carried. There is an old saying, sometimes what enters our life is not a message, but a mirror. We call 3I, divided by Atlas, a messenger, but maybe its message is simply a reflection of ourselves. When humans look at a comet, we project our fears, our hopes, our myths. Ancient peoples once believed comets foretold disaster. Others saw them as heralds of change, shaking the sky awake. Tonight, as you lie here listening, you might feel the same quiet wonder. A part of you might imagine this comet as a messenger sent not to planets or governments, but to you, to your dreams, to your unanswered questions. What if the universe sends us visitors not to destroy, but to remind us of the vastness we belong to? And then the darker thought, what if NASA's fear is not about 3I divided by Atlas itself, but about what it reveals? That we are fragile, that our maps are incomplete. That silence can carry more weight than 1,000 signals. Close your eyes for a moment if you wish. Picture 3, I divided by Atlas drifting slowly through space. Imagine its icy surface, cracked and ancient, holding the memory of stars we will never see. Each particle of dust that it sheds has traveled longer than humanity has existed. Think of distance not as miles, but as time. The comet may have left its birthplace before Earth had oceans, before trees spread across continents, before the first human dream. And yet, it arrives now in your lifetime. What are the chances? Why now, of all times? It almost feels like synchronicity, like a hand unseen has chosen this moment to deliver the visitor to our skies. That thought may comfort you or unsettle you. Both responses are natural. Both responses are human. As the section closes, let the story fade into quiet reflection. A comet has entered our system. It carries silence, mystery, and light. It is the visitor that NASA studies by day and perhaps fears by night. It is also a mirror, asking us to reflect on the stories we tell when faced with the unknown. For you, lying here tonight, it is a gentle reminder. You are part of a universe that is not finished speaking. Its language is subtle. Its timing is precise. And sometimes, its messengers arrive not with thunder, but with the hush of drifting ice. At first, 3I divided by Atlas was nothing more than a fragile glimmer so faint that many telescopes might have mistaken it for background noise, a tiny blemish against the eternal field of stars. It was only through persistence, patience, and the habit of scanning the heavens with careful eyes that astronomers noticed the anomaly. A single point of light, barely moving, yet moving differently from everything else around it. Not quite a star, not quite the ordinary signature of a near-Earth asteroid. Something in its pattern seemed to whisper, "I do not belong here." For nights and weeks, data accumulated. Observatories around the world compared their findings. When the orbit was first calculated, there was hesitation. Numbers sometimes resist interpretation, and these numbers did not fit the familiar equations of elliptical paths that circle the Sunday. Instead, the comet's track stretched, open-ended, like a road from nowhere leading toward another nowhere. Hyperbolic, they called it a path that does not close, but rather slices through our system, as though only pausing before continuing forever outward. Such a trajectory was the first clue that this visitor had not been born under our Sunday. It was not one of ours. This realization carried a quiet thrill, the kind of thrill that scientists rarely admit in public, but often feel in the solitude of night work. To witness something interstellar is to be reminded of scale. Here is a body of ice and rock that has crossed a gulf so wide that we have no word for it except infinity. It drifted in silence, untouched by planets, unclaimed by any star, until by chance, or perhaps something deeper, it intersected our awareness. In the early days of observation, the comet looked modest. Its glow was weak, a dim haze in the black. Yet, even then, it carried a strange kind of presence. Amateur astronomers peered through their personal scopes and spoke of a shimmer that seemed alive, as if the comet was breathing. Professionals, cautious with language, described its spectrum, noting the shades of cyan and emerald faintly dancing along the coma, colors that gave it a ghostly identity. To the naked eye it might have been unremarkable, but to instruments it was already a mystery unfolding. There was a sense among the watching community that something rare had been revealed. The last time Earth had known an interstellar visitor was Oumuamua, a needle-shaped object that streaked past in 2017. But Oumuamua was quick, too quick, so swift that it barely allowed us time to measure before it was gone. 3I divided by Atlas felt different, slower, lingering, almost as if it had chosen not to rush. That gave observers more time to study, more nights to trace its curve against the stars, more hours to wonder what this quiet guest truly carried with it. NASA released its bulletins, updates carefully worded, each sentence precise and modest. To the public, it was another comet, interesting but not alarming. Yet behind closed doors, one imagines the tone was less certain. Astronomers are trained to question anomalies, and 3I divided by Atlas was all anomaly. Its mass, its speed, its spectral signature, they all suggested ordinary cometary behavior, but arranged in ways that did not quite add up, like a melody with notes slightly off. It sounded familiar, yet unsettling. And here the human mind begins to wander. A faint glimmer on a telescope plate. What is it really? Just ice and dust, or something more deliberate? Some cultures once believed that comets were messengers, not merely objects but carriers of meaning. Could it be that the very first glimpse of 3I divided by Atlas was not simply an astronomical event, but also a symbolic one? A reminder that our system is not a closed room, that doors open onto larger corridors of the cosmos. Night after night, as more observatories confirmed the sighting, the comet brightened. It shed particles that caught the sunlight, making its presence more pronounced. What was once a whisper became a subtle song. Photographs showed the lengthening tail, delicate and diffuse, pointing away from the sun like a finger marking the path it had come from. In that glow, scientists traced chemical signatures: water vapor, carbon dioxide, fragments of molecules frozen since the dawn of some other star's birth. Each trace was a clue, a memory carried from beyond, older than Earth itself. To lie awake and think about this is to feel both small and strangely comforted. Imagine, here is a visitor that began its journey perhaps before humans had language, before the first fire was lit on Earth's savannas. And now, in your lifetime, it has appeared. Out of countless centuries, you are the one who hears the story of its first glimmer. It feels improbable, like catching the eye of a passerby in a crowd of billions, an encounter not meant but somehow destined. The first glimmer was faint, but it carried weight. NASA may have feared it not because of its brightness, but because of its implications. If one interstellar messenger can wander so close, how many others might exist, unseen, waiting to pass? If this one lingers, what might it reveal about the openness of our system? About the fragility of thinking we are isolated? The fear was not in the comet itself, but in what it suggested: that the boundary of our world is thinner than we believe, and that visitors may come without invitation. And so the comet's glimmer grew, night after night, until it could no longer be ignored. To scientists, it was data, but to poets, dreamers, and quiet listeners like you, it was something else. It was a reminder that light has many languages, that a faint green shimmer against the sky can be both a chemical reaction and a cosmic greeting, that what begins as a tiny anomaly on a graph can expand into a story large enough to cradle humanity's fears and hopes alike. As the first glimmer turned into a steady presence, 3I divided by Atlas ceased to be a background point and became a character in the human imagination. Its faint voice joined the chorus of myths and speculations that we carry each time we look upward. It was no longer just a dot of light. It was a question, a visitor, a mirror. And as its brightness grew, so too did the sense that its story had only just begun. The calculations came in slowly at first, pieced together by teams working across continents. Each observatory tracked the faint glow of 3I divided by Atlas, noting its subtle shifts against the tapestry of stars. On paper, the numbers looked ordinary enough until someone tried to plot them into a path. What emerged was not the neat oval of a comet bound to the sun's gravity, nor the erratic tumble of a captured asteroid. Instead, its line stretched outward, unclosed, refusing to return, hyperbolic. An orbit that enters, cuts through, and departs, like a letter slipped under the door of the solar system. The word hyperbolic may sound mathematical, but beneath it lies a story of belonging. Most objects in our skies are children of the sun, circling in endless loops, familiar and predictable. But 3I divided by Atlas was not of the sun's family. It came from a place we cannot see, and once it leaves, it may never return. That realization brought both awe and unease. To discover something that moves differently is to realize the universe is more open than we imagined, full of highways we have not yet mapped. Astronomers double-checked their equations. Could it be an error? Could the strange trajectory be explained by gravitational slingshots, by nudges from Jupiter or Saturn? But the more they refined the data, the clearer it became. This comet had not been born here. It was a wanderer, a drifter from another neighborhood of the galaxy, carrying the fingerprints of another sun, another time. Its very presence was a reminder that our system is not isolated. The walls we imagine between stars are thinner than we want to believe. As the days turned into weeks, discussions grew. Some asked the practical questions. What star might have launched it? How long had it been traveling in interstellar night? Could its chemical makeup hold evidence of distant origins, molecules shaped in a nursery far away? Others asked the more unsettling questions. Why now? Why here? Out of all directions, out of all times, why had it brushed past Earth's neighborhood at this exact moment in history? The path seemed almost purposeful. Its angle of approach, its slow drift near Mars, the way it curved with a grace that felt too deliberate for randomness, it all invited speculation. Of course, probability insists on coincidences. With countless objects moving endlessly in space, one was bound to pass near us eventually. And yet, the human heart resists such easy answers. We are creatures of meaning, always looking for a reason, always searching for intention in the silence of the stars. NASA's public face remained calm. Reports spoke of orbital elements, trajectories, predicted windows of visibility. But behind the measured tone, there were whispers. What if its trajectory brought it closer than expected? What if its hyperbolic curve was not just a pass-by, but a slow reconnaissance? Scientists avoid such language in official statements, but one wonders what private conversations carried in the hallways of observatories at night. Perhaps the fear was not that it would hit us, but that it chose to come near at all. For the rest of us, its path became a canvas for imagination. People imagined it as a messenger traveling across the galaxy, threading a route too vast for us to follow. Some wondered if its origin star still exists, or if it has long since burned out, leaving only this fragment as its memory. Others imagined civilizations watching it as it passed their skies eons ago, giving it names in languages now lost, interpreting it as a sign, just as we do now. In that sense, 3I divided by Atlas is more than a comet. It is a shared thread that may have brushed countless worlds, carrying their reflections into ours. There was also the eerie detail that its trajectory, when traced backward, pointed not to any known star, but into a region of blankness, a corridor of space without a clear birthplace. Some speculated it might have been ejected violently from a system we can no longer recognize, or perhaps slung between multiple stars until it slipped free. The lack of an origin made it more mysterious. Where do wanderers come from, if not from homes we can identify? Is rootlessness itself its origin? To watch its path was to feel the limits of our understanding. Even with equations, simulations, and models, so much remained uncertain. Would it fragment under the heat of the sun? Would it drift quietly and vanish into darkness again? Or would its journey leave behind more than dust to trace, a signal, a reminder that trajectories are not only mathematical but also symbolic? Because in its refusal to loop, in its insistence on moving on, 3I divided by Atlas seemed to echo something familiar about life itself. that all journeys are brief, all passages temporary, and that nothing truly belongs forever in one place. And yet, there was beauty in that impermanence. To know that 3I divided by Atlas came to us once, and may never again, is to realize the gift of the present moment. Out of billions of years, its path intersected with our time. You and I are witnesses to a chapter that will never repeat. This comet is not ours to keep, not ours to claim. It is a guest, and its path is its own. As it continued to brighten, drifting further along its hyperbolic arc, the sense of strangeness deepened. Some wondered if its unusual route was guided not only by physics, but by something we have not yet grasped. Was it simply random, or was there an intelligence in the very curve of its movement? The question may sound fanciful, but it lingers, because the unknown invites us to imagine. And whether the answer is yes or no, the wonder lies in the act of asking. The path beyond expectation reminds us that the universe is not bound to our patterns. It does not circle neatly for our convenience. It does not remain within the borders we draw on star charts. It moves freely, and sometimes its freedom passes close enough for us to see, close enough to stir our fears and fascinations. And so 3I divided by Atlas drifts on, carrying with it questions larger than itself. Its trajectory is more than mathematics. It is a mirror of our longing to know where things come from, why they appear, and where they go when they leave us behind. In its hyperbolic flight, we glimpse both the vastness of the cosmos and the fleetingness of our own existence. For in the end, we too are travelers, moving through time, through life, on paths that refuse to circle back. As the calculations extended, the curve of 3I, divided by Atlas, bent gently toward the orbit of Mars, as if the comet had chosen the red planet as its first pause on this long interstellar journey. For astronomers, it was coincidence, a product of mathematics and motion, the interplay of gravity shaping a wandering body's course. But for dreamers, the image of a silent visitor approaching the lonely deserts of Mars carried a weight beyond numbers. It was as if two wanderers were meeting. One, a planet that once may have held rivers and seas, and the other, a traveler from the farthest reaches of night, both converging for a moment of recognition across time. Mars has always been a stage for human imagination. From the earliest telescopes, its ruddy glow stirred questions. Was there life there? Were the canals seen through shaky glass the marks of civilizations? Was it a brother world, a mirror of Earth, or a warning of what Earth could become? And now, with rovers crawling its surface and satellites tracing its skies, humanity has pressed closer to answering those questions, though silence often answers more than certainty. Into that silence, 3I, divided by Atlas, drifted, its pale tail brushing the cold winds above Martian soil. NASA tracked it carefully, and though official language remained calm, the proximity unsettled many. The thought of an interstellar messenger drawing so near to a planet that has become humanity's future dream, our imagined second home, carried a symbolic resonance difficult to ignore. If Earth is where we began, Mars has become the canvas of where we might go. And now, in the presence of 3I divided by Atlas, it felt as though the universe had sent an audience, a witness to our hesitant steps beyond Earth. There were whispers, never in the reports but murmured in late-night conversations, that the comet slowed slightly as it brushed past Mars. Observations are never perfect. Slight errors accumulate in measurement. Yet the idea persisted, that 3I divided by Atlas lingered, as though pausing, as though regarding the planet with an unseen gaze. Perhaps it was only imagination. But imagination itself carries power. To think of the comet hovering near Mars was to picture an ancient visitor inspecting the ruins of a once blue world, a reminder that planets, too, have lifespans, and that nothing is guaranteed eternal. The rovers, of course, went on with their quiet work, oblivious to the streak above. Cameras took images of dust devils wandering the plains, of rocks unchanged for millions of years. Yet somewhere in those skies, faint and ghostly, was a reminder that Mars was not as alone as it appeared. A tail of ice, shimmering in the sunlight, curved against the black. For a moment, even if only in human perception, the desert world had company. Stories began to form around this encounter. Some said that Mars, once vibrant with rivers, was now receiving a message from beyond, that life may not remain, but stories continue. Others wondered if 3I, divided by Atlas, carried seeds of distant chemistry, fragments that, falling through Martian skies, might add to the planet's record of cosmic exchange. After all, comets have been couriers before. Earth's own water may have come from such icy wanderers, and perhaps 3I divided by Atlas, in drifting near Mars, was repeating that role, a messenger not only of mystery, but of material, scattering whispers of creation across barren land. The idea unsettled NASA, at least in the realm of speculation. If a comet can seed life, then what does it mean for a comet from another star to brush past a planet we hope to colonize? Would we be alone in shaping Mars? Or would we inherit whatever passengers 3I divided by Atlas carried unseen? The silence of official channels only fueled the curiosity. Data was collected, spectra analyzed, yet what was released remained carefully neutral. And so people filled the gaps with imagination, the way humanity always has when facing the unknown. Imagine standing on Mars, if only in your mind. The air thin and sharp, the horizon vast, mountains like frozen waves rising against the dusty sky. And then, above, the faint thread of light 3I divided by Atlas, moving with patience, trailing its luminous veil. You would look up and feel not only the strangeness of another sky, but the companionship of something even older, a traveler that did not come from Earth, that does not belong to Mars, yet shares this moment with both. The stillness of that encounter would feel like ceremony, a reminder that the cosmos stages meetings we cannot plan. Perhaps that is why the comet's passage by Mars struck such a chord. It was not about collision, nor about danger. It was about presence. To see an interstellar object near a planet that has haunted human dreams for centuries felt too poetic to be dismissed as chance. And even those who cling to probability and calculation might admit, quietly, that the poetry mattered as much as the science. In myth, Mars is the god of war, the bringer of conflict. To pair that with the soft glow of 3I divided by Atlas creates a paradox, a warrior world and a silent messenger sharing a sky. What does it mean for a symbol of battle to be visited by a symbol of distance, of wandering, of memory? Perhaps it is a reminder that conflict is not the final story. Perhaps even the harshest landscapes receive moments of grace, the visitation of something larger than their solitude. And so, Mars awaited the stranger, and the stranger passed. Not quickly, not in haste, but with the patience of a guest who lingers at the threshold before moving on. Its tail stretched across the darkness. Its nucleus glimmered with light borrowed from the sun, and the red planet stood beneath, unchanging, unmoved, yet touched in ways that only perception can measure. For in the end, what lingers is not the dust it may have scattered, nor the numbers etched in reports, but the image, a barren world receiving a visit, and a comet that paused, however briefly, to share its silence. In that pause, we are reminded of our own journeys, that sometimes we too cross paths with others not because of design, but because of timing, that pauses can carry meaning, and that presence, even brief, can leave echoes long after the traveler has gone. Mars awaited the stranger, and for a moment, the universe seemed to lean closer, watching with us, as if the meeting mattered in ways we have not yet understood. The official reports remained steady, filled with the language of precision and restraint. Numbers, trajectories, compositions, each line carefully measured, each word chosen to soothe curiosity without feeding imagination. To the public eye, 3I, divided by Atlas, was simply another comet, fascinating perhaps, but ultimately a footnote in the larger story of astronomy. Yet silence often carries more weight than words, and it was in the omissions, the empty spaces between the sentences, that the questions began to grow. Observers noticed the pattern, a press release here, a technical note there, but always with the same tone, the same careful neutrality. The comet's unusual trajectory was mentioned but never dwelled upon. Its strange glow was described in passing, as though nothing more than chemistry. Its near pass by Mars was acknowledged, but without comment on the symbolic weight of that encounter. What NASA said was less striking than what NASA did not say, and in those silences, speculation bloomed. Some wondered why the early datasets were not fully shared. Usually, raw observations flow quickly through scientific networks, allowing teams across the world to compare, debate, refine. This time, delays crept in. Access was slower, restricted, sometimes arriving only after edits and summaries had been made. For some, this was normal caution after all. Interstellar objects are rare, and mistakes could spread confusion. But for others, the delays felt intentional, as if the flow of information itself had been dimmed to control the narrative. Theories began to surface, whispered first in the quiet corners of online forums, then voiced more boldly in alternative media. Perhaps 3I divided by Atlas carried something unexpected in its spectrum, a signal hidden in light. Perhaps its path near Mars revealed anomalies in the atmosphere, interactions that instruments recorded but reports refused to mention. Perhaps its hyperbolic trajectory was not entirely natural, but adjusted, nudged, even guided by something unseen. NASA never confirmed such ideas, but neither could it erase the fact that speculation thrives in silence. For those listening closely, the tone of the official statements became part of the mystery. Why such calmness? Why such reluctance to dwell on details that, for scientists, should have been thrilling? It was as if excitement had been muted, as if discovery had been smoothed into blandness. Some suggested that the agency feared public reaction. To call attention to the comet's uniqueness might invite comparisons to Oumuamua, the interstellar visitor that had already fueled years of debate about whether it was truly natural. Perhaps NASA had decided not to open that door again, not to allow imagination to slip too far beyond control. And yet, imagination is not so easily restrained. Amateur astronomers compared their own images, noting subtle differences in brightness and hue, convinced that something was missing from the official narrative. They claimed the comet flickered at intervals too regular to be coincidence, that its tail shifted in ways unexplained by ordinary outgassing. Were these mere artifacts of small instruments, or glimpses of something larger? The question lingered, unanswered. Meanwhile, the general public began to sense the gap between the scale of the event and the scale of the response. Here was an object from beyond our star, passing near Mars, visible in telescopes, carrying mysteries across light years, and yet the tone was subdued, almost dismissive. It felt as if a visitor had arrived at the gates, and the guards, instead of welcoming or warning, simply shrugged. To many, that shrug was the most suspicious sign of all. There is power in omission. A truth unspoken can feel more provocative than a lie. By withholding emotion, by refusing to admit wonder, NASA fed the very thing it sought to contain: speculation. What if the agency had seen patterns in the comet's light that resembled signals? What if its path suggested influence by forces beyond gravity? What if something in its composition hinted at origins not entirely natural? None of these ideas had evidence, but evidence was not the point. The point was the silence that left a void for imagination to fill. And imagination filled it richly. Stories emerged of secret briefings, of data streams redirected into classified archives, of whispered collaborations with defense agencies. Some claimed the military had taken sudden interest, monitoring the comet not as an astronomical event, but as a potential unknown contact. Others insisted that private aerospace companies had been looped in, given access to information hidden from the public. Whether true or not, these stories grew precisely because the official voice remained flat and controlled. For those who listened with gentler ears, though, the silence carried a different meaning. Perhaps NASA's caution was not fear of the comet, but fear of ourselves. History shows that humanity responds to comets with myth, with panic, with prophecy. To name a messenger is to invite dread. By downplaying 3, I divided by Atlas. Perhaps the agency hoped to keep our collective mind at rest, to let us sleep without visions of omens in the sky. In that way, the silence was not suppression, but protection, a lullaby of data, soothing us against our own tendency to dream too loudly. And yet, dreams persist. To lie in bed at night, imagining 3 I divided by Atlas gliding near Mars, is to feel the weight of what is unsaid. The official reports give you coordinates, brightness, orbital elements. But what they do not give you is the sense of presence, the feeling that this visitor carries more than numbers. That is left for you to sense in the quiet, in the space between announcements. Perhaps what NASA won't say is precisely what matters most, that the universe does not simply deliver objects, but questions, and that the answers are not always meant to be given. The comet moved on, drifting past Mars, continuing its path toward the inner system. Reports continued, calm and minimal, each one another brushstroke of restraint. And yet, beneath the quiet language, something larger stirred. Because in the end, what NASA did not say may be louder than anything it could have spoken. The silence becomes the message. The gaps in knowledge become the story. And the visitor, the silent messenger, continues its journey, carrying with it not only dust and ice, but the weight of all that we imagine when truth is withheld. The silence of the official channels left space for older voices to rise, voices not bound by data or cautious reports, but by memory and myth. In the absence of certainty, people began to turn to the past, to scroll through ancient prophecies, to unearth stories long buried in dusty texts. Across cultures, comets have always been more than stones of ice. They have been omens, messengers, warnings, and guides. And as 3I divided by Atlas swept near Mars, its pale shimmer seemed to awaken those echoes, as though the old words had been waiting for this moment to stir again. In Babylonian tablets, etched thousands of years ago, scribes recorded the belief that stars with tails were voices of the gods, streaking across the heavens to announce change. Sometimes the change was fortune, the birth of a king, the rise of a dynasty. Sometimes it was disaster, famine, or plague. A comet was never neutral, it was always a sign. And now, as modern scientists debated orbital mechanics, some saw in 3I divided by Atlas a return of that ancient language. It was not just a visitor, it was a word written in the sky, waiting to be read. In China, centuries of court astrologers had recorded comet appearances with careful notes, connecting them to floods, rebellions, or celestial alignments. A greenish glow was thought to signal upheaval in leadership, a challenge to earthly power. When images of 3I divided by Atlas circulated, faint with emerald tones, whispers rose that it carried the same message that change on Earth was coming, not through politics alone but through the wider currents of destiny. The sky, after all, has always been a mirror in which humanity seeks its own reflection. The Dogon people of West Africa told stories of a star system invisible to the naked eye, Sirius, and its hidden companions, long before modern telescopes confirmed them. To them, the cosmos was alive with visitors, teachers who arrived from the stars to share knowledge before departing again. When elders heard of 3 eye divided by Atlas, they nodded quietly, as if the story was familiar. A messenger from afar, carrying secrets across darkness, was not a new idea to them, but an old friend, returning in a new form. In the myths of Greece, Atlas was the Titan condemned to carry the sky on his shoulders. To name the comet Atlas, whether by coincidence or intention, was to invite echoes of that burden. The Titan stood at the edge of the world, holding apart heaven and earth, a figure of endurance and punishment. And now here was 3 eye divided by Atlas, striding through the solar system, its luminous shoulders bearing centuries of ice and dust, as if the myth had found its way back into reality. Was it mere chance, or did the naming itself awaken an archetype deep within us, shaping the way we perceived this visitor? The Maya, gazing upward from their stone cities, carved the movements of comets and planets into calendars that spanned millennia. To them, a visitor from the sky was part of a cycle, not random but woven into the fabric of time. They spoke of eras marked by fire and water, by gods who descended and ascended, by stars that carried the rhythm of creation. If they could see 3 eye divided by Atlas now, would they mark it as the start of another cycle, a hinge between what was and what will be? The question lingered, like an unfinished chant. Even in the Quran and Hadith, scholars found verses that spoke of signs in the heavens, of stars falling, of celestial messengers that herald change. Some believers saw in the comet's glow the fulfillment of those signs, a reminder that the cosmos and prophecy are intertwined. For them, 3 eye divided by Atlas was less a coincidence of physics and more a reminder of divine timing, a call to reflection in a world too hurried to notice the sky. The resonance of these myths did not mean that science was wrong or irrelevant. Rather, it revealed that human beings, across all ages, have always sought meaning in the heavens. When confronted with a light that arrives from nowhere, we instinctively weave it into our story. Science gives us numbers, but myth gives us context. And as 3 eye divided by Atlas moved silently across the backdrop of stars, both frames of thought overlapped, calculations of trajectory on one hand, whispers of prophecy on the other. Some even claimed that specific prophecies matched the comet's arrival with uncanny precision. In medieval Europe, chronicles spoke of a fiery traveler that would appear near Mars before great upheaval on Earth. In the 13th century, an Islamic scholar wrote of a green star with a tail that would pass during an age of turmoil, signaling both danger and renewal. These writings, long forgotten in libraries, were pulled back into conversation, as if 3 eye divided by Atlas had stirred them awake. Were they coincidences, or had earlier generations truly glimpsed a pattern that stretches across centuries? And here lies the mystery. Perhaps the comet itself is not the prophecy, but the trigger. The human mind, when faced with the unknown, seeks anchors. We reach into the past, gather old words, and press them against the present. Whether those words predict the future or merely reflect our fears, they shape the way we experience the sky. 3 eye divided by Atlas may have no message, no intention beyond drifting, and yet it becomes a vessel for messages we ourselves create. It becomes the page on which prophecy is written anew. The echoes of ancient prophecy do not compete with science. They harmonize in a strange way. Science tells us the how, the arc, the speed, the chemistry. Prophecy tells us the why, or at least offers us a story to hold on to when the why cannot be answered. and between the two, a kind of balance forms. The comet is both an icy fragment and a divine messenger. It is both random and destined. It is both silence and speech. To lie beneath the sky and think of this is to hear those echoes yourself. Imagine the Babylonian priest watching from a ziggurat, the Chinese astrologer scribbling by candlelight, the Dogon elder pointing to Sirius, the Maya priest carving dates into stone. All of them looked upward and saw what you see now, a light moving where no light belonged. And all of them, in their own way, whispered, "This means something." Whether it does or not may never be known. But meaning, once spoken, has its own life. 3. I, divided by Atlas, may pass, may vanish back into the dark, but the prophecies it awakened will remain, layered onto our collective memory. And perhaps that is the true echo, not a prediction of events to come, but a reminder that every age hears the universe in its own language. For some, that language is mathematics. For others, it is myth. For you tonight, listening in the quiet, it may be both at once, folding together into a lullaby that stretches across centuries. And so, the comet drifts on, silent yet surrounded by voices. Voices from Babylon, from China, from Greece, from the Dogon, from the Maya, from the Quran, each calling it by a different name, each hearing a different meaning, but all agreeing on one thing, that when a stranger crosses the sky, the world cannot remain unchanged. The visitor becomes a mirror for prophecy, and prophecy becomes a mirror for ourselves. The glow of 3, I, divided by Atlas, grew stronger as it moved deeper into the inner system, no longer just a faint blemish against the dark, but a shimmering presence that demanded attention. Observers noted its peculiar colors, not the usual dusty whites or pale yellows of ordinary comets, but a distinct greenish-blue hue that seemed to breathe across its coma like a living aura. To scientists, the explanation was simple chemistry. Cyanogen gases, carbon molecules ionized by sunlight, interacting with solar wind to release a glow, natural, measurable, nothing mysterious. Yet even as they explained it, the glow carried a resonance beyond formulas. It felt like more than physics. It felt like intention. Because light is never just light. It is both wave and particle, both illumination and code. Every photon carries the possibility of meaning, and when those photons come from a visitor born outside the cradle of our sun, the imagination cannot help but wonder, what if this glow is not just a byproduct, but a message? What if the universe speaks, not in words, but in frequencies, in colors that fall upon our eyes as whispers of thought? The greenish-blue became a subject of quiet fascination. Amateur stargazers wrote that the comet pulsed faintly, as though its brightness fluctuated with a rhythm. Instruments traced subtle variations, difficult to prove, but enough to plant seeds of speculation. Could it be that the glow encoded patterns, not random but deliberate, like signals hidden in plain sight? The idea was not new. Radio astronomers have long dreamed of receiving messages from the stars, but to imagine such a message, in light, carried by a comet's veil, felt both poetic and plausible. Skeptics dismissed the notion as projection, humanity's tendency to see order where there is none. But history itself seemed to encourage the idea. Across cultures, light has always been the chosen language of the divine. Burning bushes, halos, guiding stars, our myths are written in luminescence. Perhaps it is because light is the only universal thing, the same for every creature, every world, every eye that has ever gazed upward. To send a message in light would be to use the oldest medium, one that requires no translation. And so, 3, I, divided by Atlas, glowed in green and blue, and the world leaned closer to listen. NASA, of course, offered its steady clarifications, careful not to give imagination too much room. Press statements spoke of cyanogen with measured detachment, reminding the public that other comets have glowed green as well. And yet, none of those comets were interstellar. None came from beyond the family of the Sunday. None carried the strangeness of a visitor whose very orbit declared, "I am not from here." To explain away the color as ordinary was logical, but it did little to quiet the sense that something larger shimmered beneath the chemistry. Philosophers began to write about it. Some compared the glow to a lantern at the edge of the cosmic road, a signal fire lit by travelers passing through. Others saw it as a mirror of ourselves, our own longing for communication reflected in the comet's light, not because the comet intended it, but because we needed it to. In either case, the glow became more than an optical effect. It became a canvas for meaning, a point of convergence between science and story. Imagine lying beneath a night sky, the air cool, the world hushed, and above you, a green-blue shimmer draped like silk across the darkness. You know it is ice and gas, you know it is distance and dust, and yet you feel it something like presence, something like attention, as though the sky itself is breathing with you, inviting you into rhythm. This is the power of light, to cross voids, to travel from unknown places and still reach the eye, still stir the mind, still awaken the heart. Some even suggested that if a message were ever to be sent across interstellar space, it would look like this, not a radio wave easily lost in the static, but a simple, visible beacon written in color. After all, we are creatures of sight. Our first instinct is to follow the flame in the dark, and perhaps, in some distant system, another set of eyes once followed this same glow, seeing in 3, I divided by Atlas not only a comet, but a messenger carrying their story to us. Theories multiplied. Mathematical models of pulse rates hidden in brightness, shifts, speculations about harmonics, in the way gas released from its surface, even whispers of intelligence shaping its arc. None could be proven, but proof was never the point. The glow itself was enough a reminder that the universe does not need to speak loudly to be heard. Sometimes, a subtle hue, a faint shimmer, is enough to stir our deepest questions. And what, after all, is a message? Is it only communication if it is intentional, or can meaning arise simply by being perceived? If a flower blooms in colors unseen by bees, but caught by human eyes, is that color a message to us? If a comet glows green in a sky of black, and we read in it hope or warning, has it not delivered a message, even without trying? Perhaps the universe does not send us notes. Perhaps it offers us patterns, and the message is what we make of them. So 3, I, divided by Atlas, continued to glow, drifting closer, its light scattering into telescopes, cameras, eyes, and dreams. Scientists measured, skeptics dismissed, believers speculated, poets wrote, listeners imagined, and through it all, the glow carried on, steady, indifferent, yet impossibly intimate. Like a lantern on a faraway shore, it signaled across distance, not with words, but with presence. A silent communication that asked nothing more than to be noticed. And in noticing, we became part of the story. The message of the comet was not in its chemistry, nor in its physics, but in our willingness to pause and wonder. In the quiet, in the green-blue light, we found ourselves listening not only to the cosmos, but to the parts of ourselves that yearn for connection beyond the boundaries of Earth. The comet glowed, and in its glow, we remembered that silence, too, can carry meaning, and that light, wherever it shines, always brings a message. The glow lingered, and with each night that passed, the presence of 3, I divided by Atlas, grew less like a distant curiosity, and more like something intimate, almost deliberate. Its steady movement across the charts was predictable, yet there was an unease in that predictability, as though its timing had been chosen with care. A comet born in interstellar darkness, wandering for untold ages, could have passed by at any moment in history. It could have drifted into our system when Earth was still a ball of fire, or when the first oceans shimmered under a young sun, or when empires rose and fell without ever lifting their eyes to see it. And yet, it arrived now in our age, in our lifetime, beneath our fragile gaze. To think of this is to feel the subtle tug of fate. The universe is vast, beyond comprehension, and still, the visitor appeared in this precise moment, as though answering a knock we did not know we had made. For centuries, we have been sending our own signals outward. Radio waves, Voyager probes, carrying golden records, telescopes, peering into the void. Perhaps, without realizing it, we have been knocking at the cosmic door all along. And perhaps 3I, divided by Atlas, is the answer, arriving not in words or machines, but in the silent elegance of a comet's arc. Some scientists, cautious but honest, admitted the timing was uncanny. In an era when humanity is stretching beyond Earth landing machines on Mars, mapping exoplanets, searching for biosignatures across distant stars, the appearance of another interstellar object felt almost narrative, as though the cosmos itself had chosen this act for our stage. Could it be coincidence? Of course. But coincidence does not cancel meaning. Often, it multiplies it. For in our minds, coincidences become stories, and stories are the way we interpret silence. Philosophers wrote that the comet's presence was like a knock at the door of our imagination, not intrusive, not violent, but firm enough to be heard. The kind of knock that makes you pause in your quiet home, wondering who waits outside. You are not compelled to open, yet the sound lingers in your mind, urging you to rise, to look, to consider what might stand there unseen. 3I divided by Atlas, with its glowing veil and hyperbolic path, was such a knock, subtle but impossible to ignore. Even NASA's careful silence seemed to magnify this impression. The very restraint of their words suggested awareness of significance, a reluctance to admit what they too must have felt. If they spoke too plainly, perhaps they feared fueling panic or unfounded speculation. Yet by holding back, they only deepened the sense that something more was happening, that behind the cautious tones, scientists too heard the knock, too sensed the question being asked. And what is a knock, if not an invitation? To knock is to reach out, to request attention, to signal presence without force. The universe, through 3I, divided by Atlas, seemed to be doing just that. It did not arrive as an asteroid on a collision course, nor as a violent storm of meteors. It arrived softly, gracefully, glowing in hues that touched imagination more than fear. It did not demand. It suggested. It did not command. It invited. And in that invitation, we are asked not to tremble, but to listen. The knock also carried with it a mirror of our own actions. For decades, we have been restless in our search for meaning beyond Earth. We listen to stars for radio whispers. We analyze atmospheres for chemical hints. We launch probes with messages etched in metal. We have been the ones knocking, hoping someone, somewhere, might hear. And now, a wanderer has appeared at our door, glowing gently, not saying a word, yet reminding us that knocks are never one-sided. When you send out a call, you must also be ready for a reply. Of course, science insists on probability, and probability is vast. Out of billions of years, the fact that we are here to witness this comet is simply a matter of perspective. But perspective is what transforms statistics into wonder. To be alive in this era, to look up and see a visitor from beyond, is to feel the delicate brush of timing. And in that timing, intention is born not necessarily from the comet itself, but from our recognition of it. We are the ones who shape chance into message. Still, the idea of intention persists, because the mind cannot help but sense patterns in the flow of events. The comet's pause near Mars, its strange hues, its silence wrapped in presence, all of it gathers into a narrative that feels designed. Not by us, not by any hand we know, but by the vastness itself, weaving meaning into its endless dance. Perhaps the knock is not from a traveler at all, but from the universe reminding us that we are part of a larger story, one that does not revolve solely around our planet or our species. At night, when telescopes tracked the glowing arc, some astronomers confessed to feeling something more than curiosity. A few described it as awe, a hush that fell over their work as they realized the scale of what they were observing. Others called it a kind of companionship, as if the comet's presence made the skies less empty. And still others admitted to unease, the feeling that a knock, once heard, cannot be unheard, and that attention, once drawn, may also be reciprocated. What if, by noticing, we too announce ourselves? What if the act of seeing is itself a form of answering the door? The comet moved steadily, indifferent to our fears and fascinations. Its glow brightened, its tail stretched longer, its path continued with elegance. And yet, for us, it was no longer just an object. It was a gesture, a signal, a question pressed softly against the door of our awareness. Was it random? Almost certainly. Was it meaningful? Absolutely. Because meaning does not require intention, it requires only recognition. And we have recognized it, felt it, absorbed it, into the language of our myths, our science, our sleepless wonder. And so 3I divided by Atlas became the cosmic knock at the door, not demanding entrance, not forcing our hand, but reminding us that the universe is alive with encounters. Some are loud, like supernovae blazing across galaxies. Others are quiet, like a comet glimmering in blue-green light. But all are knocks, each inviting us to pause, to listen, to consider that the silence above us is not emptiness, but the vastness, gently rapping, asking if we are awake. Silence has its own gravity. The more it lingers, the heavier it becomes, pulling speculation into its orbit until every whisper feels like a signal. NASA's voice, so steady and measured in its updates, began to sound less like reassurance and more like restraint. The words they offered were thin outlines, but behind them lay shadows, spaces unspoken that carried their own weight. For those watching closely, it was not what NASA said that mattered, it was what they chose to leave unsaid. And in that silence, fear began to grow. The whispers first appeared among the scientific community itself. Researchers who had once been eager to collaborate found certain data streams harder to access. Files that should have been public took longer to appear, and when they did, they seemed incomplete, as though edited. A few murmured about private meetings held behind closed doors, where fragments of observation were shared not for open debate, but for careful containment. These murmurs were not loud, not shouted in headlines, but carried quietly, like rumors exchanged in dim hallways. The comet's strange glow, its hyperbolic trajectory, its brief pause near Mars, each detail fed the unease. Were these anomalies simply natural, or had instruments recorded something stranger, something that could not be explained away so easily? What if spectra revealed patterns too deliberate to be dismissed as chemistry? What if the light carried harmonics that echoed like coded signals? Such questions rarely surfaced in official memos, but they rippled beneath, carried by the hesitations of those who had glimpsed more than they were allowed to admit. For the public, NASA's calm facade was intended as comfort, but comfort can sometimes sound like dismissal, and dismissal breeds suspicion. Ordinary people, reading the sparse updates, felt the dissonance. If this comet was truly just another icy fragment, why so many carefully phrased statements? Why so little genuine excitement? Why the sense of holding back? In that dissonance, imagination bloomed. Some saw the silence as proof that the agency feared panic. Others suspected collaboration with defense groups, as though 3I divided by Atlas was being watched not as a natural visitor, but as an unknown presence, its movements logged in ways too sensitive to release. Even within NASA, perhaps, there was unease. Scientists are human, and humans feel the weight of mystery. To study a body that defies belonging, born of another star, drifting for millions of years, arriving in our time is to feel small in a way that numbers cannot soothe. And in that smallness lies fear. Fear not of collision, not of impact, but of implication. If one such object can reach us, how many more exist? If one arrives now, what patterns might follow? The silence may not have been deliberate concealment, but the natural pause of those facing questions too vast to answer. Still, rumeur persisted. Some claimed that during internal reviews, anomalous readings had been noted, fluctuations in brightness too rhythmic to be ignored, unusual chemical signatures that hinted at compositions unseen in other comets. Others whispered that communications infrastructure satellites, deep space antennas, had picked up faint disturbances when aligned with the comet's path, as if the very act of its passing disturbed the invisible threads of signal we weave around our planet. None of this was confirmed. None of it was denied. And in the absence of clarity, silence became louder than sound. People remembered Oumuamua, the interstellar object that had sparked debates years before. Was it simply a shard of rock, or was its elongated shape and rapid departure something stranger? That debate had never truly ended, and now, with 3I divided by Atlas glowing green in the sky, the memory returned with force. NASA had learned from Oumuamua that too much speculation could not be controlled once released. Perhaps this time, the lesson was caution. Better to say little than to invite endless theories. But in saying little, they invited the very thing they feared. The hush became a canvas, and upon it, humanity painted every possibility. And fear is contagious. A faint suggestion in one conversation becomes conviction in another. A withheld file becomes evidence of conspiracy. A careful phrase becomes proof of hiding. Soon the silence itself was described as intentional, as though every gap was deliberate, every pause a decision. People began to believe that NASA knew something too strange, too dangerous, to reveal. That within their private archives, there were images and numbers that told a story far larger than chemistry or physics. That the comet's glow, its rhythm, its pause, had revealed not randomness, but purpose. Yet perhaps the fear within NASA's silence was not of the comet at all, but of us, of the stories we tell when faced with the unknown. For throughout history, comets have ignited panic, riots in cities, kings fearing downfall, priests declaring omens. To admit too much wonder, too much anomaly, would be to risk repeating that cycle on a modern scale, with news feeds and networks amplifying dread in real time. Silence, then, might have been mercy, a shield against our own imagination. But even mercy can feel like menace when it leaves questions unanswered. And so the silence remained, heavy and magnetic, drawing speculation into its orbit. Perhaps there were no secret briefings. Perhaps there were no hidden signals. Perhaps the comet was only ice and dust. But the silence itself had become a kind of message, one that said, "There is more here than we are prepared to say." And in that message, fear took root. To lie awake at night and think of this is to feel the pull of that silence yourself. You imagine the rooms where data is reviewed, the faces leaning over screens, the quiet exchanges between colleagues who know they are seeing something rare, perhaps unsettling. You picture the hesitation before a statement is released, the decision of what to reveal and what to withhold. And in that hesitation, you hear it, the unspoken admission that some truths are too large, too strange, to be folded neatly into words. And so 3i divided by Atlas drifts on, glowing softly, carrying its silence across the sky. NASA continues its measured updates, calm and controlled. But beneath that calm, there is fear not of destruction, but of meaning. Not of the comet itself, but of what it suggests. That we are not the keepers of certainty. That the cosmos does not always explain itself. That sometimes a visitor arrives and leaves us with questions we dare not answer aloud. The silence surrounding 3i divided by Atlas was heavy, yet it was not empty. In that hush, echoes of the past began to resurface, carried forward by people who could not separate the comet's glow from the long human history of seeing the heavens as more than mathematics. Science, with its instruments and formulas, described cyanogen and hyperbolic curves, but myth was never far behind. For as long as humans have watched the skies, every new light has demanded not only explanation, but story. And in the age of 3i divided by Atlas, the ancient stories felt alive again, as if stirred awake by the visitor's approach. Somewhere between telescope images and laboratory spectra, people began to speak of heavenly messengers. Priests of Babylon had once called comets the torches of the gods, flames that crossed the sky to deliver judgment or announce change. In Greece, they were omens of dynasties rising and falling, linked to the will of Olympian gods. In India, comets were called Dhumaketu, smoke banners unfurled by the divine, marking the turn of cosmic ages. These stories were not superstition alone. They were humanity's first attempts at meaning, efforts to weave the chaos of the heavens into the order of life. Now, in the faint green shimmer of 3i, divided by Atlas, people found themselves reaching instinctively for those same stories. Scientists spoke of gases and dust, but poets whispered of messages written in light. Reporters wrote of hyperbolic paths, but believers recalled prophecies of wandering stars that would signal change. Even skeptics, though they rejected superstition, could not help but admit the uncanny weight of timing, the strange poetry of an interstellar messenger, appearing just as our species began to step more boldly beyond Earth. This convergence between science and myth was not contradiction, it was dialogue. Science traced the path of the comet with precision, while myth gave that path resonance, context, and human shape. To call 3i divided by Atlas a messenger was to acknowledge both sides at once, the comet as a fragment of physics and the comet as a figure in our imagination. Each perspective deepened the other, creating a kind of harmony where calculation and prophecy met under the same sky. There were those who suggested that perhaps the two were never separate. What if myth was simply the ancient form of science, interpreting the same lights through the language available at the time? A Babylonian priest and a modern astronomer both gazed upward at strange visitors. One saw a god's warning, the other a chemical spectrum. Both, in their own way, were trying to read the universe. And perhaps 3i, divided by Atlas, drifting silently through our lives, was a reminder that the boundary between story and science is thinner than we think. For ordinary people, the blending of science and myth created comfort. Numbers alone can feel cold, but when paired with story, they become bearable, even soothing. The comet was not only data points scrolling on a screen, it was also a reminder that humanity has always shared this awe, always woven meaning from silence. To see 3i divided by Atlas was to be connected to every ancestor who once looked up in wonder, whether they named it an omen, a god, or simply a mystery. NASA, with its measured voice, resisted such language, but even there, hints of awe slipped through. Scientists, though trained to avoid metaphor, sometimes allowed themselves phrases like messenger from afar or wanderer of the stars. These words carried weight beyond numbers, revealing that even the most cautious observers felt the pull of myth. It is difficult, after all, to spend nights tracking a glow that came from another system, perhaps another age, and not sense that something larger is at play. In many ways, science and myth complemented each other. Science gave us certainty, orbital plots, chemical readings, brightness curves. Myth gave us meaning, the sense that this timing mattered, that the glow was more than coincidence, that a visitor could be both fragment and symbol. To lie awake at night and imagine this is to feel how easily the two weave together. You picture the comet not only as ice and dust, but as a storybook lantern drifting through the dark, illuminating the chapters of human imagination. Some even suggested that the return of myth was itself the message. Perhaps 3I divided by Atlas did not need to speak in signals or codes. Perhaps its role was simply to remind us of our nature, that we are meaning makers, that we cannot see a light in the sky without turning it into a mirror of ourselves. If so, then the comet's gift was not only its presence, but its power to awaken the old voices, to let science and myth meet again in a world that often tries to keep them apart. And so, as the comet glowed and silence deepened, humanity found itself telling stories once more. Stories of gods and omens, of destiny and change, of warnings and blessings. Stories anchored by science, but lifted by imagination. In the quiet of night, both the astronomer with a telescope and the child looking out a window shared the same thought. This is more than chance. This is a messenger, not because it speaks, but because we hear. 3I divided by Atlas carried no flag, no inscription, no words written on its icy body. Yet in the blending of science and myth, it carried something more profound, a reminder that we, too, are part of a story that stretches across time, a story told not only in laboratories and equations, but in the whispers of prophets and poets. The visitor was real, measurable, undeniable, and the meaning it stirred was equally real, even if it could not be plotted on a chart. As the comet moved on, its path traced by both formulas and fables, the convergence remained. Science met myth not in conflict, but in harmony, each reflecting the other, each reminding us that truth is more than data and more than story. Truth is the quiet space where both exist together, shimmering like a green-blue glow in the night. And 3I divided by Atlas, silent and steady, became the vessel for that truth, a messenger not of fear, but of connection, carrying across the stars the simple fact that we are listening and that we are never truly alone under the sky. The green-blue glow still shimmered in the sky, and though science traced it with confidence, myth wrapped around it like a cloak. As people whispered of messengers and omens, another thought began to surface, one more haunting than any prophecy. What if 3I divided by Atlas was not new to us at all? What if this was not its first crossing into our lives, but merely its latest? The hyperbolic orbit marked it as an interstellar wanderer, a visitor from beyond the family of our Sunday, yet trajectories are long and memory is longer. Could it be that this comet, or others like it, had swept past long before, brushing Earth with their tails in time so distant that history cannot record them? The suggestion was not without precedent. Ancient chronicles, scattered across cultures, speak of strange stars appearing suddenly, blazing bright, then vanishing into silence. Chinese astronomers catalogued them meticulously, drawing careful records of comets with unusual colors and unexpected movements. Babylonian tablets spoke of fiery visitors whose timing seemed too rare to belong to ordinary cycles. The Maya recorded periods when new stars flashed across the heavens, altering the calendar of their rituals. Could one of those visitors, unnamed and long forgotten, have been 3I divided by Atlas itself? If so, then its return was not merely chance, it was memory resurfacing, like a shadow stepping into light again. Some suggested that perhaps comets like this do not wander aimlessly, but trace paths too vast for our calendars to measure, returning only once in 1,000 lifetimes. And when they do, they bring with them echoes of the ages they have already seen, carrying fragments of forgotten suns, whispers of civilizations long vanished, reminders of worlds that once looked upward as we do now. To imagine this is to stretch the mind across epochs. Picture Earth in its infancy, when continents were still finding their shape, when forests had yet to rise and oceans were only beginning to settle. Perhaps even then, 3i divided by Atlas drifted past, unseen by eyes that did not yet exist, leaving a subtle mark in the chemistry of seas or skies. Picture later, when humanity was young, gathering around fires, watching the heavens in wonder and fear. Could they have seen this same green shimmer, recording it in stories that outlasted language, myths that trickled down through generations until they became prophecy? Science gives no certainty here, only possibility. The hyperbolic path suggests that it may never return, that this is a once-in-an-eternity encounter. And yet, the mind resists absolutes. Perhaps hyperbolas bend in ways we do not yet understand. Perhaps gravitational nudges, unseen forces, or cosmic tides carry these wanderers back across the same thresholds again and again. To consider that 3i divided by Atlas might have touched our skies before is to realize that time itself may be less linear than we think. The comet could be both ancient and new, both past and present, weaving its presence into cycles too immense for us to trace. For those who lean into myth, this idea fits easily. Prophecies rarely speak of single events. They speak of returns, of cycles, of patterns repeating like echoes. A messenger who comes once is a story. A messenger who returns is a destiny. Perhaps humanity has always lived in the shadow of these cosmic wanderers, meeting them age after age, never remembering clearly, but always sensing something familiar. Perhaps every culture's tale of a blazing sign, every record of a wandering light, is part of a long chain of encounters with the same silent traveler, slipping in and out of our awareness across millennia. Even the name Traveler of Forgotten Times feels apartment. For what is forgotten is not lost. It lingers beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to resurface. A comet is like that too, hidden in the darkness of interstellar night, unseen for ages, then revealed in a sudden blaze before vanishing once more. Its memory is not ours to hold, yet we feel it all the same, as though something deep within recognizes the light. Perhaps our awe at comets is not merely fear of the unknown, but recognition of an old acquaintance returned at last. Speculation deepened when researchers compared ancient descriptions with modern observations. Some medieval texts spoke of a star that burned green and lingered near Mars before fading away. Others described a light that came suddenly, brighter than expected, then fragmented into silence. To skeptics, these were coincidences, the natural variety of comets catalogued across centuries. But to believers, they were clues, a trail of breadcrumbs, suggesting that 3i divided by Atlas had brushed past before, leaving faint imprints in the memory of humanity. If so, then its arrival now was not an introduction, but a reminder. And what does it mean to be reminded? To see again a face you do not fully recall, but which stirs something deep and unnameable. That is what 3i divided by Atlas felt like, to many who gazed upon it. Not a stranger, but a presence that evoked déjà vu, a sense of having been here before, as though humanity itself carried the memory of previous encounters etched into myth, into prophecy, into the collective unconscious. NASA did not speak of this, of course. Their silence was steady, their words focused on data. Yet, even silence cannot erase the sense of continuity. The universe has seen countless travelers, and humanity has seen some of them before. Whether 3I divided by Atlas is one of those or not, almost doesn't matter. What matters is the recognition, the feeling, that this visitor connects us not only to the stars beyond, but to the ages behind, binding our present moment to forgotten times. And so the comet drifts on, not only as an object in motion, but as a bridge between science and myth, between present and past, between what we remember and what we have lost. It is a traveler, carrying fragments of stars, echoes of civilizations, whispers of moments that came long before us. Whether it has passed before, or whether this is its only crossing, the effect is the same. It awakens memory, real or imagined, and in doing so reminds us that we are part of a continuum that stretches far beyond a single lifetime. To look upon 3I divided by Atlas, then, is not only to witness a moment of astronomy, it is to stand at the threshold of memory itself, sensing the vastness of time pressing in. Perhaps this is not its first visit. Perhaps it will not be its last. But in this moment, as we watch its glow shimmer in the sky, it is enough to know that we are not the first to feel this awe, and we will not be the last. The traveler has returned, and in its return, we remember what we had forgotten, that the universe keeps its own history, and sometimes it allows us to glimpse a page. The traveler moved past, its glow fading slightly as distance grew, but the memory of its pause near Mars lingered. It was as if the comet had brushed its tail across the planet's silent surface, stirring not only dust in its thin atmosphere, but also thoughts long hidden within us. Mars has always been more than a world of rock and desert. It has been a mirror for our imagination, a stage upon which we project both hope and dread. Now, with 3I divided by Atlas passing so close, the question deepened. Could Mars itself be keeping secrets, waiting for such a visitor to awaken them? From Earth, Mars appears as a small ember in the sky, glowing red with the reflection of the Sunday blam. But up close, we know it as a land of canyons, deeper than Earth's oceans, volcanoes taller than our mountains, plains scarred with dry riverbeds that suggest a time when water once flowed freely. Mars is a planet that speaks of absence rivers that no longer run, seas that no longer exist, skies that no longer carry warmth. And yet, in that absence lies the hint of a story, one that feels incomplete, as if a page of history has been lost. Scientists have long wondered whether Mars once held life. The rovers that crawl across its sands search not only for rocks but for whispers of biology, patterns in soil, traces of organic molecules, signs that something once lived and breathed there. Each discovery feels like a fragment of a larger puzzle, one that refuses to yield its final image. And into that refusal stepped 3I divided by Atlas, a comet from beyond, passing overhead like a finger, pointing toward hidden chapters. Could it be that Mars has been waiting, not just for us, but for such moments of cosmic visitation to unlock its story? For comets are not only wanderers, they are carriers. They bear within them the frozen chemistry of creation, molecules that may have seeded life on Earth itself. If 3I divided by Atlas carried such ingredients, what would it mean for those fragments to drift into the thin air of Mars, to fall silently upon its sands, merging with whatever traces remain there? Could the meeting of comet and planet awaken processes long dormant, stir embers that have slept for eons? The thought is speculative, but speculation is often where wonder begins. There are myths, too, that whisper of Mars as a world touched by messengers. Ancient stories spoke of gods of war descending in fire, of lights crossing its skies, of omens tied to its blood-red hue. Some tales even suggested that Mars had once been alive with voices, now silenced, its memory preserved only in the dust. If so, then the passage of an interstellar messenger above it would feel less like coincidence and more like ritual, a reminder that even barren worlds have chapters not yet read. One cannot help but imagine the surface of Mars at that moment. Dust storms curling across plains, craters rimmed with shadows, the ancient volcano Olympus Mons standing silent as a continent, and above it, faint but steady, the glow of three eye divided by Atlas sweeping across the thin sky. Perhaps no eye was there to see it, but the planet itself received the visitation. Rock and sand, long indifferent to time, felt the gentle touch of a light from beyond. And though no words were spoken, the silence carried weight as if something buried beneath remembered. Some scientists quietly wondered if comets passing near Mars might have played a role in shaping its history. Impacts long ago could have delivered water, sparked chemistry, altered climates. Perhaps 3i, divided by Atlas, was part of that same lineage, a reminder of the forces that sculpt worlds as much as planets do themselves. The thought that Mars and the comet were not strangers but old companions added depth to the encounter. If Mars holds secrets, maybe comets are the keys that turn them. In the public mind, the speculation grew bolder. Stories appeared of hidden structures buried in the Martian soil, of artifacts awaiting discovery, of signals that rovers had brushed against but not revealed. While official voices dismissed such claims, the imagery was powerful: a silent planet keeping its mysteries, and a comet drifting overhead like a trigger waiting to be pulled. Perhaps nothing stirred that night. Perhaps the sands remained untouched. But in human imagination, Mars seemed to awaken, as though the visitor had tapped gently at its long-closed door. To dwell on this is to recognize how much of Mars lives within us. We speak of colonizing it, of building domes and cities, of breathing its thin air one day. Yet beneath that ambition lies a deeper feeling that Mars holds something we have forgotten, something not just for the future, but from the past. It is not only a world we want to go to, it is a world we feel we already know. And when 3i divided by Atlas passed above it, shimmering softly, it felt like two old companions meeting once more, their silence more eloquent than speech. The secrets of Mars may never be simple. They may be locked in rocks a mile beneath the surface, in molecules too fragile to survive exposure, in patterns only the patient can decode. Or they may lie in myth, in the stories of red gods and warlike omens, in the sense that Mars has always been more than it appears. What the comet added was not evidence, but invitation. An invitation to wonder if perhaps Mars itself has been waiting for messengers to pass, to remind us that it, too, is part of the cosmic conversation. As 3i divided by Atlas drifted onward, leaving Mars behind, the sense of secrecy remained. The red planet kept its silence, as it always has. But silence is not emptiness. It is potential, a pause between notes. The comet's passing did not break that silence. It deepened it, made it feel alive, as though something beneath the dust had stirred ever so slightly. And in that stirring, we are reminded that every world, no matter how barren, holds secrets, waiting for the right visitor to awaken them. And so Mars continued to turn, its deserts untouched, its mountains immovable, its canyons vast and hollow. Yet above it, a glow had passed, a silent messenger from another star, and in that passing, the planet's secrets seemed closer, if only by a breath. The red planet remains a mystery, but mysteries are not failures of knowledge. They are invitations. And in the quiet meeting of comet and world, we are reminded that the universe does not reveal everything at once. It waits, it pauses, it keeps its secrets until we are ready to hear them. The comet drifted beyond Mars, its glow softening as distance grew, yet its presence remained in the human mind. It was no longer simply an object moving through space. It had become something closer to a companion, a figure woven into our imagination. The further it traveled, the more people turned inward, asking not what the comet was, but what it reflected in us. Between stars and souls, the line began to blur, and philosophers found themselves drawn into the conversation as surely as astronomers. For centuries, thinkers have taught that the cosmos is a mirror. Plato spoke of the heavens as the realm of ideals, where the truth of our being is reflected in the patterns of stars. The Stoics believed that to study the skies was to study the divine order, a harmony that also lived within the human soul. Even in the East, Taoist sages and Buddhist monks gazed upward, not for calculation alone but for reflection, seeing in the motions of celestial bodies a map of the inner self. To them, the universe was not indifferent. It was intimate, a vastness that revealed our own hidden shapes. And now, with 3, I divided by Atlas, shimmering against the dark, those old teachings felt alive again. Was the comet only ice and gas, or was it a mirror showing us what we most needed to see? Its hyperbolic path, unbound by the sun, reminded us of our own longing for freedom, our refusal to be trapped in cycles of repetition. Its silence mirrored our own silences, the things we carry but do not say, the fears we hold close in the quiet hours of night. Its glow reflected not only the chemistry of cyanogen, but the human tendency to read meaning into beauty, to find significance where none may exist, and in doing so, to create significance of our own. Some philosophers wrote that the comet was not an object at all, but a question one shaped in ice, carried across light years, delivered to us at precisely the moment when we were ready to ask it. What does it mean to be small? What does it mean to be temporary? What does it mean to wander? These are not questions only for science, but for the soul. And in the faint shimmer of 3, I divided by Atlas, those questions seemed written across the sky, like an invisible script, waiting to be read. Others went further, suggesting that the comet was a kind of cosmic mirror in which humanity saw its reflection, fragile, fleeting, luminous in its own brief moment, and destined to pass on. Just as 3I divided by Atlas will sweep through our system once and be gone, so too will each of us pass through life, seen for a moment, remembered for a moment longer, then carried away into silence. To watch the comet, then, was to confront mortality, not with fear, but with a strange comfort. For if even a wanderer of the stars can shine so beautifully in passing, perhaps so can we. Religious thinkers added their voices, speaking of the comet as a test, a reminder, a call to humility. The Quran spoke of signs in the heavens, and this seemed to be one of them, a sign not to terrify, but to remind us that creation is vast and we are but one part of it. Christian mystics, too, found resonance, recalling the Star of Bethlehem as a symbol that light from above carries messages beyond understanding. And in Hindu philosophy, where time is cyclical and universes themselves are born and die in endless rhythms, the comet was seen as part of that eternal dance, a reminder of impermanence and renewal alike. Yet not all saw it through religion. Some felt it in their solitude. A poet lying awake at night might whisper that the comet was listening, not speaking, that it reflected the silence of our own longing, the deep ache to be known by something greater. The thought was soothing, that when we look at 3I divided by Atlas, it does not ignore us, but reflects us, carrying our gaze back into itself. In that sense, it is not only a mirror of humanity, but also a partner in our eternal search for meaning. Even in the scientific community, hints of this reflection appeared. A few astronomers, though careful in public, confessed privately that the comet seemed alive in a way difficult to describe. Not alive as in biological, but alive as in resonant, a presence rather than just a thing. Perhaps this is only projection, the human need to humanize. Yet projection itself reveals the truth, that the line between object and mirror is not always clear. Sometimes, what we see out there is really what we are seeking within. Between stars and souls, 3I eye divided by Atlas, held its place. It did not claim to speak, yet it seemed to answer. It did not seek to guide, yet it inspired direction. It did not intend to reflect, yet it became a reflection. And as it drifted further, its presence in the human mind only grew. Because once a mirror is raised, we cannot help but look. Once a question is asked, we cannot help but wonder. To see the comet was to feel our place in the cosmos. Small, temporary, wandering, and yet luminous, capable of leaving trails of beauty in the darkness. The comet's gift was not knowledge alone, but perspective. It reminded us that between stars and souls lies no great distance, only the thin veil of perception. What we see in the sky, we also see in ourselves. The silence of 3 divided by Atlas is our silence. Its light is our longing. Its journey is our journey. And so the traveler moved on, but the reflection remained, etched not in telescopes or reports, but in the quiet spaces of thought. Between stars and souls, the line had blurred, and in that blur, humanity glimpsed something rare, a reminder that to look outward is also to look inward, and that every messenger from beyond is also a mirror, carrying us back to ourselves. The thought that 3 divided by Atlas might be more than drifting ice lingered like a whisper too insistent to ignore. For many, its glow was enough light shimmering in the dark, a mirror of our own longing. But others, leaning closer to the numbers, began to sense patterns where randomness should reign, movement that was smooth, yet somehow rhythmic, brightness that wavered, not like chance flicker but like a pulse. These were fragile impressions, difficult to prove, yet they grew into a question that spread quietly. What if the comet was not simply moving, but signaling? Signals can take many forms. We are used to thinking of messages as words, waves, transmitted across space, radio beacons, rising from one world to another. But a signal does not need to be so obvious. A signal can be a rhythm, a sequence, a shift that repeats in ways too consistent for chaos. And in the long nights of watching 3 divided by Atlas, some astronomers began to wonder if its silence was less silence than code. An intelligence folded not into sound but into light, not into speech but into movement itself. Independent researchers were the first to voice it openly. Amateurs who compared brightness logs across weeks claimed to find repeating intervals, faint but regular, like the beat of a distant drum. Others, watching its path, spoke of slight deviations, arcs that bent in ways too neat to belong entirely to gravity. These claims were dismissed as overinterpretation, noise mistaken for signal. Yet they spread, carried by fascination as much as by evidence. Because once the idea is planted that a messenger might actually be a message, it becomes hard not to look for meaning in every flicker. NASA, predictably, kept its calm tone. Variations in brightness, they explained, could be the result of outgassing, as frozen pockets of gas erupted under solar warmth. Deviations in trajectory could be errors in observation, instruments catching their own limitations rather than cosmic design. And perhaps all of that was true. But to those already suspicious of silence, such explanations sounded like rehearsed lines, like words chosen to settle minds rather than open them. If there was no signal, why work so hard to insist upon the randomness? If everything was ordinary, why did the glow feel so deliberate? Speculation turned to more daring thoughts. Some suggested that the green-blue light itself carried information, not just reflected sunlight, but modulated in subtle ways, a pattern waiting to be decoded. Others imagined that the hyperbolic path was not a straight escape, but a trace of intention, a trajectory written like a glyph across the solar system, a line meant to be read. A few even went so far as to suggest that the comet itself was a kind of vessel, a machine disguised as nature, its icy shell concealing something older and stranger within. To most, these were fantasies, but fantasies have their own gravity. People gathered online to chart possible codes, to map pulse intervals against prime numbers, to imagine what message might be carried in the shimmer of cyan light. Was it warning? Was it greeting? Was it simply the universal signal of presence saying, "We are here"? No one could answer, yet the very act of asking drew people deeper into the mystery. The comet became less a thing to watch than a question to ponder, and in that pondering, it became alive. Philosophers reminded us that whether the signal was real or imagined, the meaning was undeniable. To see pattern is to reveal our own nature. We are creatures who search for rhythm, who cannot let silence remain empty. Even if the comet says nothing, our belief that it might becomes its own kind of dialogue, the speculation is itself a signal, reflected back into us, that we are listening, that we are waiting, that we are ready for a reply, even if none comes. Still, the thought persisted. What if it is a signal? What if the variations are not chance, but choice? The idea is intoxicating, because it blurs the line between cosmos and consciousness. If a wanderer from another star carries even the hint of intelligence, then the universe itself changes. We are no longer observers of nature alone. We are correspondents in a conversation too vast to comprehend. And in that shift lies both wonder and fear, the same twin currents that have always run beneath our stories of heavenly messengers. To imagine this is to lie beneath the night sky and feel the hush of distance pressing in. The comet glows, faint but steady. Its light flickers, perhaps at random, perhaps in rhythm. You listen, though there is no sound, and yet you feel it, the possibility of a message carried across centuries, across light years, across the silence we thought unbroken. Even if your mind says it is only ice, your heart hears something else, a voice too soft to dismiss. NASA's silence, then, takes on another weight. If patterns exist, why would they not share them? Perhaps because they fear ridicule, the collapse of authority in admitting what they cannot explain. Or perhaps because they fear the alternative, that the patterns are real, that something has indeed reached out across the void, and that we are not ready to hear. To release such knowledge would not simply inform, it would transform, and transformations are always dangerous. Easier, perhaps, to let silence reign, to let speculation remain in the margins where it can be dismissed as dream. And yet, the dreams continue. People draw charts, compose algorithms, compare notes. Some hear pulses in recordings, others trace harmonies in the data. None can prove, none can disprove. The signal, if it exists, remains hidden, like a voice just beyond hearing, a word carried on the wind but never caught. But perhaps that is the point. A true message need not be decoded at once. A true message may simply be presence, the fact of arrival, the shimmer of light, the steady movement across the dark. To exist where we can see it may be all the signal ever needed. And so 3, I divided by Atlas continues, its glow steady, its silence heavy, its presence undeniable. Some say it carries a signal. Some say the signal is only our own reflection, our need to be heard echoed back through ice and dust. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the universe speaks in ways we cannot yet translate, and perhaps our longing to translate is itself the message. Between randomness and rhythm, between silence and signal, lies the truth of the comet, that it is both question and answer, both messenger and message, both object and mirror. And as it drifts further, the speculation only grows. For whether the comet speaks or not, it has already changed us. It has made us listen, made us search, made us believe in the possibility of dialogue across the stars. And in that belief lies the real signal, not from the comet to us, but from us to ourselves, reminding us that we are still listening, still waiting, still willing to be surprised by the quiet knock of the universe at our door. Speculation about signals, codes, and messages carried in the glow of 3i divided by Atlas did not fade with denial, nor with silence. Instead, it lingered, growing into something more profound, a confrontation with the unknown itself. For behind every theory, whether hopeful or fearful, was the deeper truth that humanity struggles when faced with mysteries too vast to contain. The comet had become more than a traveler. It had become a mirror of our own unease, a reminder that the unknown is both a source of wonder and of dread. Throughout history, we have feared what we do not understand. Early people looked at comets and saw omens of death, famine, or war. Armies trembled when bright streaks lit the skies, kings sought counsel from astrologers, and ordinary families prayed that the world would not end. Yet, alongside the fear, there was awe. Those same comets were painted into myths as messengers of gods, heralds of renewal, signs that destiny itself was shifting. The duality has never left us. To encounter the unknown is to feel both fascination and terror at once. 3i, divided by Atlas, rekindled that ancient response. Science explained its path, its chemistry, its speed, and yet explanations did not dissolve the feeling. Because knowledge may clarify, but it does not always comfort. To know that this visitor came from beyond our sun was not reassurance, but a deeper kind of uncertainty. If one comet can cross the void, countless others may too. If one messenger arrives in our time, why now, and what might follow? Each answer opened doors to larger questions, and each question carried the weight of possibility we could not control. The fear of the unknown often arises not from danger itself, but from the absence of control. We cannot predict with certainty when visitors like 3i divided by Atlas will arrive. We cannot fully trace their origins, nor command their paths. They belong to a scale that ignores us, a scale where centuries are moments and galaxies are neighborhoods. To recognize this is humbling, but humility often shades into dread. What place do we occupy in a universe that can send wanderers across unimaginable distances, arriving without invitation, leaving without explanation? And yet, fear is not the only response. The same vastness that unsettles us also soothes us. To lie under the stars and imagine a comet from another system is to feel small, yes, but also connected. Connected to the endless story of creation, to the possibility that life, meaning, and intelligence stretch far beyond Earth. The unknown is frightening because it strips us of certainty, but it is also wondrous because it offers us more than we imagined. The human heart carries both truths at once, trembling and yearning in the same breath. Philosophers have long noted this tension. Edmund Burke called it the sublime, the feeling of being overwhelmed by greatness, so vast it inspires fear and beauty together. Kant described the awe of the night sky as something that humbles us while at the same time elevating our spirit. And mystics across cultures spoke of encountering the divine as both terror and ecstasy, because what is greater than us must also be beyond our control. In this way, 3i divided by Atlas became more than a comet. It became an experience of the sublime, drawing us into that uneasy space where wonder and dread intertwine. NASA's silence reflected this too. Perhaps it was not only secrecy or caution, but recognition of the same duality. To say too much might feed panic. To say too little might feed suspicion. In their restraint, they mirrored the human condition itself, hesitating between awe and fear, between revelation and concealment. The agency's silence became a symbol of our difficulty in facing what we cannot fully explain. We do not know whether to embrace it or to defend ourselves against it. For ordinary people, the fear of the unknown often took subtler forms. Some lay awake at night, staring at the faint shimmer in the sky, wondering if it meant danger to Earth. Others felt a more existential dread, the awareness that if such objects can appear, then our planet is never entirely safe, never entirely shielded from the wider cosmos. Still, others feared, not collision but contact. What if the comet was more than ice? What if its silence was deliberate? The mind spins in the space between answers, filling uncertainty with its own anxieties. But fear, too, is a teacher. It reminds us of our limits, forces us to confront truths we prefer to avoid. Fear shows us that control is an illusion, that safety is fragile, that the unknown will always exist no matter how much we learn. And in that recognition lies a kind of wisdom, even peace. To admit fear is also to admit humility before the cosmos, to acknowledge that we are not masters, but participants in a story too large to claim. The comet thus became not only an astronomical event, but a meditation on fear itself. Why do we recoil at mystery? Why do we resist silence? Perhaps because silence leaves us alone with ourselves, and in that solitude we face the greatest unknown of all, our own existence. If the universe is vast and full of visitors, what is our place in it? Are we meaningful, or are we fleeting? These questions echo the very rhythm of the comet's passage, entering from darkness, glowing briefly, vanishing into night. Yet even as fear stirred, so too did wonder. Children gazed upward with excitement. Artists painted its glow. Poets wrote of its silence. Dreamers saw in it the possibility of connection. Fear did not erase beauty. It accompanied it. Just as a melody needs both light and shadow, so too does awe require its echo of dread. The human fear of the unknown is not weakness, but balance. A reminder that we feel most alive when we stand on the edge of mystery, trembling yet drawn forward. And so I divided by Atlas, carried with it not only dust and ice, but the reflection of our own hearts. It reminded us that we fear the unknown because it matters, because it touches something deep within us that is unprotected. But it also reminded us that fear and wonder are not opposites. They are companions. To stand under its glow was to feel both at once the fragile dread of not knowing and the quiet joy of being allowed to witness. And perhaps that is the comet's true gift. Not answers, not signals, not certainty, but the experience of standing between fear and wonder, and realizing that both are part of being human beneath the endless stars. As humanity gazed at the slow drift of I, divided by Atlas, the question that had lingered beneath every whisper began to surface more clearly. What does it mean? We called it a messenger. But from the beginning, there had been unease in that word. Messengers carry intention, and intention carries weight. A message may bless, or it may condemn. A letter may hold comfort, or it may bear the seal of war. To see the comet as a messenger was to open ourselves to both possibilities, that it came with guidance, or that it came as warning. History gives us no simple answer. Comets have always carried this duality. To the Maya, they were signs of cycles renewing, markers of cosmic time, heralds of continuity. To medieval Europe, they were omens of catastrophe, disease, famine, kings falling from thrones. Even within the same culture, they could mean both life and death, depending on the interpreter. The same streak of fire could be read as hope or doom, a gift or a curse. And so it was with I divided by Atlas. Its glow shimmered across the sky like a riddle, and humanity stood beneath it, wondering which way to read the lines. The science was clear enough. It posed no danger of collision. Its path, though close enough to stir the imagination, would not intersect with Earth. Yet, that knowledge did little to quiet the sense of symbolism. Because danger need not strike in impact. It can arrive in reflection. Perhaps the warning was not of physical threat, but of fragility, of how thin the boundaries of our world truly are. A visitor from another system is reminder enough that we are not an island. If one such body can arrive unannounced, countless others may as well. In that sense, the comet's very presence is a warning that the universe is not predictable, not sealed, not under our control. Others saw the glow differently, softer, more benevolent. They spoke of guidance rather than danger, of a teacher arriving in silence. Perhaps it did not come to frighten, but to remind, to show us that we are part of a continuum larger than Earth alone. Its hyperbolic path, escaping the pull of the sun, could be read as lesson, to seek freedom, to resist cycles of repetition, to remember that journeys need not circle endlessly, but can move forward into the unknown. In this reading, 3, I, divided by Atlas, was not warning us, but guiding us, offering a mirror of what we might become, wanderers not bound to one home, but voyagers between stars. Between these two interpretations lay the heart of the riddle. Was the comet messenger or warning? Perhaps it was both. A single light can be seen as flame to warm or as fire to destroy. The meaning lies not in the light itself, but in the eyes of those who behold it. For those inclined to fear, it became omen. For those inclined to hope, it became gift. And in that tension, humanity revealed itself, always reading the universe through the lens of our own hearts, finding in the stars what we most expect to find. Yet there is also the possibility that the comet itself held no message at all. That, to call it messenger or warning, is to project our own needs, to anthropomorphize a fragment of ice and dust that knows nothing of us. And still, projection itself becomes meaningful. Because what we see in the comet is not only about it, but about ourselves. If we see a warning, perhaps it is because we know we stand on fragile ground, aware of our own crises, climate, conflict, the precarity of our place in time. If we see a messenger, perhaps it is because we long for reassurance, for the thought that the cosmos cares enough to speak. In either case, the comet becomes mirror, reflecting our own inner state. Philosophers suggested that perhaps the distinction between messenger and warning is false, that they are two faces of the same truth. A true messenger always warns, for truth unsettles. A true warning always guides, for fear awakens awareness. To see 3, I divided by Atlas, is to be reminded of impermanence, of smallness, of vulnerability. That reminder can be read as gift or threat, but it is always message. In this way, the comet need not choose. It is both messenger and warning, carrying both awe and unease in its silence. The glow itself seemed to echo this duality. In its green and blue, people saw both life and eeriness. Green as the color of renewal, growth, the breath of spring. Blue as the color of distance, cold, silence. Together, they wove a palette that was neither entirely comforting nor entirely frightening. It was twilight made visible, balance caught in light. The comet's beauty was undeniable, but beauty itself can carry dread, because it reminds us of what we might lose. At night, lying beneath the stars, one could feel the ambiguity settling like a weight. The comet drifted above, unhurried, indifferent, yet its presence pressed against thought. Was it a herald of danger, urging us to prepare for an unpredictable cosmos? Was it a guide, reminding us to dream beyond our small world? Or was it only ice, silent and unaware, with all meaning born only in the fragile creatures who watched it? No answer came, only the glow itself, steady and patient, as though waiting for us to decide. And perhaps that is the deepest truth. That meaning is not delivered from above, but made here, in us. The comet's silence is the blank page. We are the ones who write upon it. To call it messenger or warning is to admit that we cannot resist writing meaning into the dark. We need messages. We need warnings. We need the universe to feel not empty, but alive, responding to our questions even when no reply is sent. And so 3, I, divided by Atlas, became both at once, a silent teacher and a silent caution, a mirror of our longing for guidance and our fear of what guidance might demand. As it continued its journey, passing steadily into deeper silence, this ambiguity did not lessen, it deepened. The longer it lingered, the more people wondered. Its patience seemed intentional, its glow deliberate, though reason reminded us otherwise. But reason does not end longing, and longing does not end fear. Between them, the comet floated, carrying with it both possibilities, leaving us suspended between hope and dread, between guidance and warning, between message and silence. And in that suspension, we discovered something of ourselves, that we are beings who cannot rest with the unknown. We must shape it, name it, give it form, even when that form splits into opposites. To call the comet messenger or warning is to confess our humanity, to admit that the universe terrifies and consoles us in equal measure, and that both responses are true. The debate over whether 3, I divided by Atlas, was messenger or warning, remained unresolved. But while philosophers and scientists struggled with meaning, ordinary people looked upward and saw only light. It was in the evenings, when twilight softened the world and the first stars pierced the horizon, that the comet revealed its most delicate beauty. Against the fading sky, its glow appeared not harsh, but gentle. A greenish veil stretched across the blue, like a breath exhaled into darkness. Observers spoke of its presence with a language less of data and more of feeling, calming, haunting, impossible to ignore. There is a moment at dusk when the earth itself seems to pause, when the noise of day retreats and night rises carefully, as though not to disturb. In that moment, 3, I divided by Atlas, appeared as though it belonged, neither of day nor of night, but of the in-between. It shimmered faintly in the last rays of the sun, then deepened as shadows grew, until its glow stood alone, a lantern hung in the vastness. Some described it as a star misplaced, others as a brushstroke across the canvas of twilight. Yet, all agreed that its beauty was unlike the familiar lights of the sky. It had a softness that was both tender and uncanny. Artists tried to capture it, painting streaks of emerald and sapphire into evening skies, but the images could never fully contain its presence. Poets compared it to a ghost wandering between worlds, too distant to touch, too near to forget. Even those who knew nothing of its origin felt something stirring when they saw it. The comet's glow seemed to hum in silence, like music without sound, a vibration that lingered in the chest long after the eyes turned away. For astronomers, twilight was also the most challenging time to observe the balance between brightness and dark left instruments, struggling to adjust. Yet even they, hunched over monitors and graphs, admitted privately that there was something otherworldly about those moments. Numbers could measure the glow, but numbers could not explain the feeling it left behind, that the night itself was aware, that the heavens had opened a little wider to let a stranger in. As the nights lengthened and the comet's visibility grew, people around the world began to share their accounts. From deserts where the air was sharp and clear, watchers spoke of the tail stretching like a river of mist across the horizon. From crowded cities, where lights dulled the stars, the comet still pierced through faintly, reminding even the busiest souls that the universe stretched beyond skyscrapers. In quiet villages, elders told children to remember this sight, because such visitors do not return often. And in every story, the same words emerged: beautiful, haunting, calm, strange. Beauty, though, is rarely without unease. For all its tenderness, the glow carried something slightly unsettling. It was too perfect in its timing, too fragile in its presence, as though it might vanish without warning. Some described the feeling of being watched, not in menace but in intimacy, like meeting the eyes of a stranger across a crowded room. Others spoke of dreaming differently on nights, when they saw it, dreams of oceans that shimmered with green light, of skies filled with silent wanderers, of voices carried in color. Whether coincidence or suggestion, the comet's glow seemed to touch more than eyes. It touched the quiet places of the mind. At twilight, the boundary between waking and dreaming blurs. The world softens, and so too do the barriers of thought. Perhaps that is why the comet felt most alive then, not in the brightness of day, nor in the deep black of midnight, but in the in-between. It seemed to belong to thresholds, to passages, to moments when one thing becomes another, just as dusk becomes night, just as silence becomes sleep. So too did 3I divided by Atlas embody transition. It reminded us that existence itself is not static but always moving, always transforming, always shimmering between states. Children looked at it and asked simple questions their parents could not answer. Why is it green? Where did it come from? Will it stay? Their parents, unable to explain fully, whispered back guesses, weaving stories that mixed science with wonder. In those exchanges, the comet became more than light. It became memory in the making, the kind of memory that lingers across generations. One day, those children may tell their own children, "I saw a comet that glowed like the sea at twilight, and it made the night feel alive." Even those who never saw it directly felt its presence through words, through images, through the quiet excitement it stirred. In a world so often divided, the comet offered a rare moment of unity. Millions of people, scattered across continents, lifting their eyes toward the same glow. It was a reminder that beauty belongs to no single place, no single culture. When night embraced the sky, it embraced us all beneath the same light, equal in our wonder. And perhaps that is why its beauty felt haunting, because it was fleeting, because it belonged to a moment we could not hold. Like twilight itself, the comet's glow was a transition, passing, vanishing, leaving only memory behind. To witness it was to feel both joy and loss at once, the happiness of presence and the sorrow of impermanence. And in that balance, humanity found itself reflected again, fragile, luminous, destined to fade, yet unforgettable in the moments we shine. So the nights went on, and the comet drifted further, but the memory of twilight remained. When night embraced the sky, 3I divided by Atlas embraced us too, not with words or promises but with light. And in that light, we felt something rare, the beauty of a stranger who did not stay, yet whose presence left the world a little softer, a little more mysterious, a little more awake to the silence of the stars. The comet drifted further, its glow dimming slightly as distance grew, yet the memory of twilight lingered in human hearts. Even as it receded, a question began to take shape. Would this be the last time we ever saw 3I divided by Atlas? Or might it return again, long after our own days have passed? Astronomers calculated its hyperbolic path and concluded that, by all we know of physics, this was a one-time encounter. A traveler from beyond had passed through our solar system, brushed our skies, and would vanish forever into the dark. Yet still, the idea of return refused to fade. Whispers rose in conversations, in late-night reflections, in essays and poems. What if the visitor comes back? There is something in us that resists finality. We do not want beauty to vanish without promise, nor mystery to end without continuation. To say that 3I divided by Atlas will never return feels too sharp, too absolute, and so the mind imagines alternatives. Perhaps its path will be bent again, nudged by forces we cannot predict, caught in invisible tides that will one day bring it back. Perhaps what looks like departure is only the first arc of a greater cycle, too vast for our calendars to contain. Just as ancient myths spoke of cosmic ages, of returns written into the rhythm of time, so too do modern dreamers imagine this comet's light reappearing, not for us, but for generations unborn. Some astronomers, cautious yet intrigued, admitted that trajectories can shift in ways subtle and surprising. A brush with a planet's gravity, a fragmenting of the nucleus, a hidden mass within the tail, any of these could alter the path ever so slightly. And in the mathematics of eternity, even slight changes matter. A fraction of a degree might mean the difference between vanishing into the abyss and looping back across millennia. The probability may be faint, but faint is not the same as impossible. And so, in the quiet spaces between certainty, the whispers of return find room to grow. For poets and philosophers, the thought of return carried symbolic power. If the comet comes back, it would not only be a traveler, it would be a teacher. Its reappearance would mean that the universe itself remembers, that beauty and mystery are not fleeting but cyclical, repeating like the turning of seasons. Just as spring follows winter, just as dawn follows night, perhaps comets, too, follow rhythms we cannot yet see. To imagine three, I divided by Atlas, crossing our skies again thousands of years from now, is to imagine humanity's descendants lifting their eyes to the same light, feeling the same awe, writing new stories onto an ancient presence. There is comfort in that thought. It binds the present to the future, weaving continuity across time. You, lying awake tonight, gazing at its glow, become part of a chain that may stretch far ahead. One day, long after your life is over, another person might stand beneath the same sky, watching the same comet, and feel the same wonder. In that moment, you are connected across centuries, as though the comet were a thread tying souls together in the fabric of time. Perhaps that is its true message, not a signal in light, but a promise that beauty repeats, that awe returns, that we are never entirely alone in our longing. But whispers of return also carry unease. If it comes back, what else might it bring? Comets are carriers, after all, of dust, of ice, of fragments older than Earth. To imagine its return is also to imagine the possibility of collision, of danger, of futures marked not by wonder, but by catastrophe. Some legends speak of comets that cleanse worlds, sweeping away old ages to make room for new. Could 3I divided by Atlas, in some far future, become such an instrument? If so, then the promise of return is double-edged, both blessing and warning, both guide and threat. And yet, even that duality feels natural, almost necessary, because the idea of return is never neutral. It always carries both hope and fear. To imagine the comet's light sweeping across our skies again is to imagine humanity itself surviving long enough to witness it. That thought inspires longing for endurance, for continuity, for survival through ages we can barely comprehend. And at the same time, it reminds us of fragility, of the countless ways history can shift, of the possibility that when the comet does return, no one may be left to see it. Perhaps this, too, is the deeper meaning of the whispers, that they are not predictions, but desires. We want the comet to return because we want ourselves to endure. We project our longing for continuity onto its path, making it a vessel for our own hope that humanity will outlast wars, crises, and time itself. Whether or not 3I divided by Atlas truly circles back, the wish itself reveals us. Creatures who cannot bear the thought of finality, who always search for cycles, who long to believe that nothing beautiful is ever truly gone. As 3I divided by Atlas drifted further, telescopes followed its fading light until even the largest instruments could barely hold it. And yet, even as the numbers thinned, the whispers grew louder. People spoke of writing its name into calendars, as if to mark an appointment across centuries. Writers imagined civilizations yet unborn reading of it in old archives, searching the skies for its glow. Some dreamed that one day our descendants might not only see it but meet it, sending ships to greet the traveler when it returns. The comet then became more than visitor. It became a future story waiting to be written. The silence of the present only amplified that possibility. For if the comet leaves no clear message, then perhaps the message belongs to time itself. Perhaps its words are not for us, but for those who come after, hidden in its ice, waiting to be read when the world has changed. In that sense, every comet is a letter sealed in darkness, delivered across ages, addressed not to the present, but to the future. Whether the letter is ever opened may depend on return. And so we whisper, quietly but persistently, may it come again. And in that whisper lies comfort. The thought that beauty is not a one-time gift, that silence can repeat, that even as we vanish, the cosmos remembers. Whether true or not, the idea of a future return allows us to rest more gently, to imagine that our place in the universe is not only fleeting but cyclical, echoing back in patterns we may never see but can still believe in. 3. Eye divided by Atlas drifts on, into darkness, into silence. But in its wake, it leaves a promise written not in certainty, but in hope, that the universe does not end with endings, but continues with returns, with repetitions, with whispers that echo across time. Even as whispers of a future return softened into dreams, the present moment held its own gravity. Across the world, people gazed at the fading glow of 3, Eye, divided by Atlas, and found themselves bound together by a common thread. For once, the vast divisions of culture, language, and belief seemed smaller than the question that shimmered above them. Whether seen as messenger, warning, or simple fragment of ice, the comet inspired the same quiet awe, and in that awe, it stirred something rare. Unity, born not of certainty, but of shared wonder and fear. In cities where neon drowned the stars, crowds gathered on rooftops and open fields, chasing glimpses of the visitor. Photographs passed quickly across networks, each one a grainy capture of a faint light, yet each carrying significance far beyond its brightness. People who had never spoken to one another shared images, comments, sighs of amazement, as though the comet itself was a thread weaving strangers into kin. In remote deserts and mountain villages, where skies remained untouched by human glow, the experience was even sharper. The comet, a bright wound across the horizon, luminous, undeniable, reminding entire communities of their place beneath the endless dome of night. Religious voices rose in response, each faith finding resonance in the glow. In mosques, imams spoke of signs in the heavens, encouraging prayer not from fear, but from humility. In churches, pastors reminded congregations that the cosmos was alive with symbols of creation's grandeur, and that every star and comet bore witness to mysteries greater than human grasp. In temples, chants were lifted as the comet was folded into cycles of karma and renewal, its passing seen as both reminder of impermanence and promise of rebirth. And in homes, families gathered quietly, some to pray, some to simply hold hands while gazing upward, sharing silence as though silence itself were devotion. Scientists, too, joined the chorus not in ritual, but in curiosity. They watched the data stream in from telescopes, tracing every shift in brightness, every curve in the trajectory. For them, the comet was both question and gift, offering rare insight into interstellar matter, into the chemistry of worlds beyond our Sunday. Yet, even among them, the language sometimes drifted into reverence. In interviews, voices softened, metaphors slipped through, comparisons to lanterns, messengers, even omens. Though they grounded themselves in numbers, they too were caught in the wonder of the unknown. And between prayer and science, lay the ordinary human heart, caught in a feeling that words could not hold. It was fear, yes, but not the fear of panic, rather the fear of vastness, the fear of being small, the fear of not knowing. That fear did not divide, it united. Because all across the earth, from crowded cities to lonely fields, people were asking the same questions. Why now? What does it mean? Will it return? And though answers never came, the shared act of asking was itself a form of communion. For once, humanity looked in the same direction. Our divisions, political, cultural, economic, blurred in the face of something that belonged to none of us. The comet did not speak one language, did not shine for one nation, did not favor one faith. Its light fell equally on all, indifferent yet intimate, and in that equality we found ourselves strangely together. People posted their local times in online comments, marveling at how the same glow touched dawn in one country and dusk in another. Strangers blessed each other across continents, bound by the quiet knowledge that they were watching the same visitor beneath the same stars. There was fear in this unity, but not destructive fear. It was the kind of fear that softens the heart, that teaches reverence, that makes prayer and science companions rather than rivals. Fear that reminded us of fragility, but also of kinship, because when the unknown arrives, we are reminded that we are all equally vulnerable, equally small, equally dependent on one another for meaning. The comet did not divide us into believers and skeptics, but bound us into a circle of shared silence, each carrying awe and dread together. Elders told old stories, weaving the visitor into myths that stretched back centuries. Children asked their parents if the comet could see them, if it knew who they were. Lovers whispered promises beneath its glow, binding their fleeting moments of intimacy to the passing of a stranger in the sky. Farmers paused in their fields. Astronauts on orbiting stations paused at windows. Soldiers on distant posts lifted their eyes everywhere. The same light, the same hush, the same sense of being watched by something greater than themselves. The fear that unites us is not a fear of destruction, but of significance. What if this really is a message? What if it is nothing at all? What if we are alone? What if we are not? These questions are both terrifying and beautiful, and they belong to all of us equally. No boundary can separate them. No doctrine can silence them. In that way, 3i divided by Atlas gave us more than data, more than beauty. It gave us ourselves, gathered together in wonder and unease, drawn into the same question that every culture has asked when a stranger crosses the sky. And perhaps that is the comet's deepest gift, not a signal carried in light, not a prophecy fulfilled, not a warning carved in orbit, but unity. Unity born of fear and awe, of not knowing and yet daring to gaze upward anyway. For in that gaze we remembered that, beneath all difference, we are one species beneath one sky, fragile wanderers ourselves, learning slowly that the unknown does not only divide it, also binds. So the comet moved on, leaving behind no message we could decode, no proof we could hold in hand. And yet it left something just as real. A memory of nights when humanity stood together, hearts trembling with the same fear, eyes lifted toward the same light, souls joined in a silence that was not empty but full. That silence was its message. That unity was its gift. The light of 3i, divided by Atlas, grew fainter with each passing night, until even the largest telescopes strained to find its trace. Soon it would vanish entirely, slipping beyond the reach of our instruments, dissolving into the same interstellar night from which it had emerged. For many, this marked the end of its story, a brief crossing, an interlude in the sky, a visitor who appeared and departed without lingering. But absence is not emptiness. In vanishing, the comet left behind something greater than fragments of dust or streams of data. It left behind a message not written in words or encoded in signals, but carried in silence, in reflection, in the way it changed those who saw it. That message is layered, like light refracted through crystal, each angle offering a different meaning. To the scientist, it was a message of knowledge. To the believer, a message of faith. To the dreamer, a message of beauty. To the philosopher, a message of humility. All of these interpretations coexist, woven together by the comet's brief passage, reminding us that truth in the cosmos is never singular but always manifold, shimmering differently depending on how we look. For the scientific world, the legacy of 3, I divided by Atlas, is tangible. Instruments captured its spectra, its brightness curves, the gases that composed its veil, the structure of its tail as solar winds sculpted it into ribbons of light. Astronomers mapped its hyperbolic path, traced its trajectory back toward interstellar origins, and catalogued its chemistry as a record of places far beyond our reach. In this way, the comet became a courier of knowledge, a physical link to regions of the galaxy we may never see directly. Every fragment of data is a clue about how solar systems form, how matter drifts between stars, how the universe recycles its own history across eons. For scientists, the message left behind is simple yet profound. The cosmos is larger, stranger, and more interconnected than we ever imagined. But science was not the only voice. Faith communities across the globe also read meaning in the sky. To many, the comet's appearance was not random but ordained. Imams spoke of signs written in creation, encouraging believers to look upward with humility and gratitude. Priests reminded congregations that God speaks not only through Scripture, but through the heavens, and that silence can be as much a message as sound. In temples and shrines, worshippers lit candles, sang prayers, and folded the comet's glow into their rituals, as though it were a thread binding human devotion to cosmic mystery. For the faithful, the message left behind was not data, but reassurance, a reminder that the universe is not indifferent, but alive with signs, and that our gaze upward is always answered, even if not in words. For ordinary people, the legacy of the comet was more personal, carried not in equations or sermons, but in memory. Families remembered stepping outside together at dusk, pointing toward the greenish shimmer, and feeling wonder ripple through them. Children remembered, asking their parents what it meant, receiving answers that were part truth, part story, part silence. Lovers remembered watching it hand in hand, linking their fleeting intimacy to the fleeting light. Farmers, workers, students, all carried with them a moment of stillness, a pause in life when the universe brushed against their awareness. The comet left no relics we could hold, but it left memories that will endure, carried quietly within the fabric of countless lives. Philosophers and poets, too, found their message in the silence. For them, the comet was not object, but mirror, reflecting humanity back to itself. It reminded us of impermanence. Just as 3 I divided by Atlas appeared for a moment and then departed, so too do we pass briefly through the span of time, luminous for an instant, before vanishing into silence. Yet, within that brevity lies beauty, the kind that cannot be diminished by transience. The comet's glow reminded us that to shine, even briefly, is enough to leave a mark. It also reminded us of humility, that the universe does not exist for us, that we are not its center, but that even so, we belong within it, capable of recognizing beauty and weaving meaning from silence. The duality of its legacy, both messenger and warning, remains unresolved. For some, the message was comfort, proof that the cosmos still holds wonders, that we are part of a universe that shares its treasures without demand. For others, the message was caution, a reminder of how fragile our world is, how little control we have, how vulnerable we remain to the whims of space. Both readings are valid, both written in the same glow, and perhaps both were always intended. The comet did not come to resolve our uncertainty, but to deepen it, to remind us that fear and wonder are inseparable companions when facing the unknown. Even now, as the visitor fades into memory, its presence continues to ripple through thought. Scientists will publish papers, believers will tell stories, poets will write verses, children will grow into adults who remember the night skies of their youth. And through each of these echoes, the comet's message will endure, not a signal encoded in light, but a transformation in perspective. It made us look upward. It made us remember that the sky is alive with motion. It reminded us that we are not isolated, but part of a wider conversation, one that may never be spoken aloud, yet which we are always listening to. And perhaps this is the final message, that silence itself can speak. 3. I divided by Atlas did not thunder with impact, did not blaze with apocalyptic fire, did not deliver clear words across the void. It came softly, shimmered, gently, lingered briefly, and departed without explanation. And yet, in that silence, we heard everything. We heard our longing for meaning. We heard our fear of insignificance. We heard our hope for connection. The comet gave us back our own voices, reflected through its glow. So the message left behind is not in the comet itself, but in us, in the way we gathered beneath its light, in the way we argued and dreamed, prayed and calculated, feared and marveled, in the unity we found across divisions, in the awe we felt despite differences, in the humility we rediscovered beneath the stars. That is the legacy of 3, I divided by Atlas. That is the letter it left, unwritten but undeniable. The comet moves on now, vanishing into the infinite. But messages do not require permanence to be real. Sometimes the briefest of encounters leaves the deepest mark. And so it is. With 3, I divided by Atlas. It may never return, but it will not be forgotten. Its silence will echo in our stories. Its glow will live in our memory. And its message, fragile, mysterious, immeasurable, will remain. That we are small, that we are fragile, but that we are also capable of wonder. And in wonder we become vast. And perhaps, in the quiet of night, that is all the message we need. And now, dear listener, as the journey of 3, I divided by Atlas drifts into silence, so too does our story. The comet has carried us across questions and mysteries, across science and myth, across fear and wonder. It came to us as a stranger, lingered long enough to become a mirror, and then departed without farewell. Yet in its absence, it has left behind something more enduring than light, the reminder that the universe is always larger than we can grasp, and that this vastness can cradle us rather than frighten us. You may feel small beneath the stars, but that smallness is not weakness. It is belonging. Just as the comet carried fragments of ancient suns, so too do you carry fragments of stories, of memories, of dreams. And just as 3, I divided by Atlas, glowed brightly only for a moment, your own light, brief as it may be, is enough to touch others and to be remembered. The silence it carried into the night sky is the same silence you can rest within now, safe, quiet, endless. So breathe gently, as if your breath is in rhythm with the turning of the stars. Let your body grow heavy, your thoughts soften, your mind drift like a traveler into the wider dark. Sleep is its own cosmos, a place where questions fade and only peace remains. The comet has moved on, but its calm remains with you, surrounding you like a blanket of starlight. Close your eyes, rest. You are part of the story the universe tells, and tonight that story invites you to dream.